Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Raise.dev Hacktoberfest Help Desk. My name is Joe, and this is our second show of the day. If you are new here, the Hacktoberfest Help Desk is your resource. This Hacktoberfest help you get all the information you need to land your pull requests during the month of October, during this open source celebration that we call Hacktoberfest. We're going to be joined by a special guest today, and we're going to be playing the old code review game, as well as hearing a little bit about their developer journey and about the cool things that they get up to in their day-to-day. But before that, a couple of brief notes for you. As I said, we are here to help. So most important thing for you to know is you can ask us questions anytime in the chat, whether they're about what we're speaking about or something entirely different. That is super welcome. You can find us on Twitch chat and you can ask any questions there. If you want to post a link about, I don't know, your own project or something that we're talking about, or you just want to share a link, that's totally fine. But you will not be able to post it by default because we have a moderation bot on due to the nature of the internet. So if you want to post a link, please just let me know at RaiseDevs and say, hey, I want to post a link. This is the reason why. NH Carrigan, one of our regulars, has just demonstrated what happens if you try to post a link. You will get your message will be deleted and you'll be timed out. So if you want to post a link, let me know and I'll allow you to do that. That's not a problem. We just need to have some advance notice because at least once a stream, the spam bots come on through. So we want to make sure that you're not one of them. So other than that, couple of things for you to know. First of all, I said this is stream 2 of free today. You can find all of our streams for the week. We go live 3 times a day at twitch.tv RaiseDev schedule. We've got a really packed schedule this week. We will be live 3 times a day, every day actually, up until the end of October now. We're fully booked. And our schedule is updated week by week on this page. So you'll find our great guests for the week. Stick around at the end of the show and I'll run you through who we've got coming on the rest of the week. We do a little teaser for you. And I'll talk about who we've got on tonight's show as well. And then secondly, if you want to ask us any questions and you're not quite ready to ask it in chat or it's a complicated issue, you can ask us at Raise.dev Hacktoberfest. On that site, there is a form where you can submit your question. We will then find the best one of our guests to answer it for you, answer it here live on the show, and send you the recording direct to your email. So you get all the help you need straight to you. So you can find that at Raise.dev Hacktoberfest. And then finally, if you haven't heard of us at Raise.dev before, we are a service to help you level up in your developer career, whether you're trying to get your first dev job, or you're trying to change careers, or you're trying to get promotion, or you're trying to level up your team, whatever it is, we have experienced coaches who are here to help you. We'll match you with a coach who will work with you to get you the experience you need to make your career goals. And whilst we're in early access, we are completely free. So you can sign up at Raise.dev. Okay. That's all of my waffle. Let me bring on our guest for this show. Please welcome Mr. Jason to the stage. How you doing, Jason?
Hello. I'm doing well. How are you? That was a good intro thing.
Thank you. I'm really working through this mid-afternoon energy. Would you like to introduce yourself for the folks who haven't met you before? Oh, sorry, please.
Yeah. No, I do feel like I was lied to. I thought we were just going to play Hades on stream for like...
I would play Hades on stream. That's what I do between streams.
Okay, so my name is Jason. I work at GitHub as a software engineer. Right now I work on the docs engineering team. So if you've ever gone to docs.github.com, it's a little Node.js app that I and my team maintain. In my, I don't know, time as a person, I was in GitHub where I first met Joe.
Yes.
Joe? Yeah. Getting the hands right.
Yeah, I'm in that direction. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so I'm also a maintainer of a project called Probot, which is a GitHub, or it's a framework for building GitHub integrations. Yeah, I think
it's a wonderful framework for GitHub integrations. So we've got so much to talk about because so many of those things are amazing. And first of all, I guess, so you mentioned you're on the docs engineering team. This is the new docs app that recently launched and went open source, correct?
That's the one.
Perfect.
Did just go open source. Thank you for doing my job for me.
No problem. Well, it was on mind because we had Gregor on the show earlier in the week who was talking about this as well. So I will find that blog post for y'all. There we go. Got it. So yeah, I didn't know you were working on that. That's a relatively new role for you. How did that come about?
In May, cool. You know, tech companies, reorgs, they like to change things up and move people around.
That's very true. So yeah, I guess we should I could start by talking about your career journey to get to this point. So as you said, we first met when you were interning at GitHub, but you were actually a designer on the training team when we met. You weren't interning at GitHub on software engineering. So how you ended up like jumping across to, and I have to be embarrassing and say, and leveling up to senior engineer really quickly within GitHub in such a short amount of time has always been like deeply, and also a deeply aspirational and inspirational journey for me as an observer. So do you want to talk a little bit about, I guess, like how you got started and then how how you got into dev from where you were.
I'm so glad I get to talk about this because now I get to tell everyone how I cheated.
Perfect. We love it.
Okay, so you're absolutely correct. When I was an intern at GitHub, my job title was, I think, designer for training or something like
Right.
that. At the time, the GitHub training team, so that's a team of folks who go to companies, enterprises, help them adopt GitHub, Git, modern software practices. You'd be surprised around the kinds of things that old style companies do with tech.
Right.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
So they had a bunch of online free training learning resources. And so my job as at the time I was studying graphic design in university, my job was to come in and help to design some assets for this training platform. It was really just like a bunch of static tutorial sort of content. So on day one of my internship, I love telling this story. On day one of my internship, my manager, her name's Cynthia. I still get to work with her. Thankfully, she's
Cynthia's
wonderful.
rad. Yeah.
Cynthia's awesome. So she says to me, "We have this thing that we want you to work on, but you can work on whatever you think is most impactful, whatever you can be proud of." And I said, "Cool, I'm going to do something else." And they were like, okay. "Cool, we'll support you." And they did. Awesome.
Nice.
The thing that I ended up doing was still largely design work. It was basically building a Jekyll site. But let me tell you, the internal politics of doing that it wasn't really politics. It was just like getting everybody organized and getting everybody like content and stuff together.
Right, which is also like no small feat, like especially when you're, an intern new to the org and you're like, hey, all these people in all these different orgs, I need this from you.
Yeah. I got to work with a project manager for that, and oh my God, was she awesome! Like,
nice.
Yeah, I don't know how we could have done that without her. But yeah, so that went really successfully. And then during my time as an intern doing that, I can't remember why this happened exactly. It's probably Wilhelm's fault. We, who was another intern, we started working with someone named Brandon Keepers on a project called Probot.
Yeah.
Probot, I mentioned this earlier, framework for building GitHub integration. So it's a little Node.js library that abstracts away a whole bunch of the sort of like hard parts of building integrations on GitHub. So specifically authentication, webhook management. This like provides a really clear API for you as a Node.js dev writing GitHub integrations.
Right.
So I forget exactly why, but I said, yeah, cool, I'll help with this. This sounds fun. So I did. It was fun.
Yeah.
And then I'm probably skipping some steps here, but then at the end of my internship, maybe like a month after I totally left GitHub, the training team that I had just left came to me and said, we want to hire you as a contractor to do this very one specific thing. The reason you are a good person to do this is A, we don't have any other engineering resources to tap right now.
That's always flattering, isn't it?
Exactly. I was the only person. But also, the thing that they wanted to build was very heavily a GitHub integration. And Probot happened to be the perfect sort of like core system for it.
Yeah.
And that turned out to be true in a whole lot of ways. And so I was an obvious person to do that. So this was a brand new project that had just started. Like nobody had put, any amount of like hands to keyboards on it. It was just like a whole bunch of ideas.
This is the training project, not Probot. Probot by this point had like launched over that summer, right? And
yes.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, exactly. So this ended up being called GitHub Learning Lab, lab.github.com. So this is a real thing that we built over probably like a year and a half, 2 years, something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that started as a project with me, a contractor, as the only engineer. We built sort of like a scoped version of it for a
Right.
specific customer.
Yeah.
And then over time, we like hired more people for that particular project. We, built out more features, did a whole bunch of work on it. And that's when, so after we hired 2 people, probably about a month after,
Yeah.
I became the tech lead for the team. I think a lot of it was just being there the longest and
Right.
writing, most of the code.
And, starting the project, building,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And then when my team got reorged into a different part of the org, this is, one of like 3 reorgs in the last, 2 years. That's when my job title changed to senior software engineer.
Awesome. Very cool.
Now you're caught up.
I am caught up. Wonderful. Cool. Yeah. So there's like, you spoke a little bit about Probot and kind of like where it comes from and what it is. But I think one thing that like is useful to go back to on Probot is like that it developed very quickly a very integral role, I guess, in the GitHub ecosystem in terms of like really helping maintainers, particularly who are well known for having a disproportionately large and unrewarded workload. It helped them manage it, like had a lot of automations to help them. Do you want to talk about that a little bit and some of the ways you saw it used?
Yeah. So, man, this brings me back to some of my conference talks from like 3 years ago now. I talked a lot about non-technical debt. So, I think other people, especially folks from the GitHub sponsors team, they've spoken a lot more intelligently about that than I have. But maintainers deal with a million different things, including like the actual work itself. The actual code writing work, I should say. To try to help them manage their community, manage their repositories in whatever kind of automation ways that we can, will help them, which will in turn help everybody else. So things like the stale bot. So I think that's github.com/probot/stale, but now there's an actions version of it.
/stale. Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's a better one. So that's a really good example of something that has actually helped a lot of really large open source projects. People don't always like it because it tells the truth that no one wants to hear, which is that, sometimes issues get closed because no one's going to do anything with them. And at least that's a clearer message for the people that open them, the people that have expectations around it, right? So stuff like that really helps to sort of take a little bit of the work away from the human maintainers and give a little more work to the robots.
Right. Awesome. Cool. And yeah, so you mentioned that stale has been moved to GitHub Actions. This is something we got into a little bit with Gregor, but there is still, so we were talking to Gregor about the fact that there is still a place for kind of like Probot, even though Actions can do a lot of your GitHub specific workloads. Can you tell us a little bit about the places where like you would still use Probot today?
Not only can I can also point you to a blog post.
Ooh, nice.
Do that, but in a much more smarter way. I don't actually know.
Perfect.
I can drop it in the private chat because that's.
Yeah, if you drop it in the private chat, I can post it for you.
Cool. But TLDR, Actions. It's mostly about speed. So Actions, every time that it has to respond to an event, it's basically building up a new VM and running your code there. There are ways to make it much faster than by default, like using a JavaScript action. That way it doesn't have to like build a container or anything like that. But it's still building up a whole VM to like respond to a webhook. Probot apps benefit from being able to respond immediately, right? It's just a node server. It's Express under the hood. So as soon as it gets a webhook, it immediately does the thing. There's some other sort of limitations of Actions, just by virtue of it being kind of like a serverless function environment, but not really. It's ephemeral. It's tied to GitHub. Whereas Probot is an a whole Express app that you run yourself. So you have as much control as you want, but then you have to like deploy the thing, and you have to care about performance and all of those things. So it's always a trade-off. I'd say the large majority of like workflow automation things should be left to GitHub Actions.
Sure.
But there are some clear exceptions.
Yeah. And I guess one of those clear exceptions is going to be Learning Lab, right? Which was at least originally built on Probot. I imagine it's diverted in some interesting ways since as it grew to a full product, but is one of the examples of 2 products actually that GitHub has that built in Probot, because the Slack integration is also Probot, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, cool, awesome. So do you want to talk a little bit more about Lab? And I know you don't work on it anymore, but like what Lab was and how it worked, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So Learning Lab is a sort of automated training thing that happens inside of GitHub repositories. So it's especially geared towards folks who don't know how to use GitHub at all. They come to Learning Lab. Learning Lab says, we are going to create a repository for you. And in that repository, we're going to try to teach you how to do stuff.
Right.
The first example is in a course called Introduction to GitHub. The first step in that course, you go and assign yourself to an issue. To do that, Learning Lab, the sort of bot persona of it, opens a new issue in a repository that it created for you. The body of that issue says, assign yourself to this issue by clicking the button over there. Go and click the button over there. And then the bot responds in that issue and says, you did it. Great job. I'm so proud of you. Here's the next thing.
I love a bot that validates me.
Yeah, exactly. So it is Probot, and it's we had to sort of reach into the internals of Probot a little bit for sort of convenience, but it worked out pretty well.
Nice, awesome. Also, just a quick apology. I looked distracted for a minute there because someone in my apartment building has decided that it's time to play some thumping music. So if you can hear anything from me, I'm very sorry.
I can't hear anything, but I kind of wish I could. That sounds great.
I'll put on the royalty-free music again. Perfect. NH Carrigan said that's the only kind of validation I get. I'm so sorry, NH Carrigan. You're always welcome here.
I'm with you.
We value you in this chat. Cool. Yeah. So that's awesome. So thank you for running us through those things. Those are both projects which I have spent a lot of time with and know more deeply, and have messaged you more than once in the middle of the night saying, Jason, it doesn't work, help me. So it's nice to hear the full story. I have no ability to tell the thumping music. I think it's in the flat below me, unfortunately. Anyway, so you have also bought a project for us to get into today, I believe, in our... Nice, yeah. So we did this thing, for those who are new to the show, we like to ask guests to bring old code with them so that they can review it with their new eyes and think about what they have learned in the years since they wrote that code and how they would write things differently today. And I believe you have brought us an attempt, I believe an aborted attempt at writing a CMS in Node. Is that correct?
I'm going to say it was a successful but aborted.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Cool. Should I share my screen?
Yeah, do the screen thing.
Do the screen thing.
Deploy the screen.
Deploying the screen. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Nope, not yet. Almost. Now you can.
There we go.
Sweet. Okay. We're going to start on GitHub. You can see
we can straight away see it's archived. Yeah.
Yeah. You can see that it's been archived. I have a good story about this.
Okay, cool. Go ahead.
So first of all, this is called Flint CMS. It is a Node.js CMS. For those of you that aren't familiar, a CMS is a content management system. So it's especially used for things like, or at least the reason that I built this was for things like client projects where a person would say, hey, we need a website, but we also need to change the content up every once in a while.
Right.
So I built this right off of doing a client website for somebody and having to reach for a PHP CMS, which is totally fine, except that I don't know PHP. And as soon as I had to write a custom plugin for this particular project in this particular CMS, I thought to myself, well, geez, what if I just like wrote a whole Node CMS instead?
Nice. So someone in chat said, Strappy-like. And yeah, Strappy is a great example of what I guess you would use nowadays rather than writing your own, which is now there are a wide variety of options for kind of headless CMSs. So funnily we have Daniel from Strappy coming on tomorrow, and we had Shy from Contentful on last week.
Nice.
So yeah, I guess it falls. What you're trying to do falls somewhere in that spectrum of things.
I would not classify this as a headless CMS.
Sure.
I also can't say I fully understand the word headless CMS, but this is, if you've ever used Craft CMS, it's a PHP CMS that you sort of have full control over the code for the templates themselves, but everything else still uses like sort of one centralized monolithic server thing. Yeah, thank you for the link.
No worries.
Yeah, so this is basically like I use Craft CMS, really liked it, but it's in PHP, so now I'm going to go and make a Node alternative.
Perfect. And so you said you consider this successful. Does that mean it worked and you did use it in client projects? Did you finish it or finish?
It worked.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah, no, that's about it. It worked. So
awesome.
It's successful.
What else can we aspire to?
Exactly. Okay, so you can see that it's archived. It's only been archived for a couple of months. Mm-hmm. The reason I archived it was that somebody at GitHub, this was for GitHub Satellite, which I don't remember when that was, but a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
Somebody at GitHub was like, we're doing a security part of the keynote at GitHub Satellite. We need examples of projects that had CVEs, so security vulnerabilities, that our new functionality would have caught.
Right.
Yours has one of those. So
that's embarrassing. Did they just checked every staff member's GitHub for CVEs or what?
I'm not sure how they found it. So it was so I have the tab open here. I have to Google it. But basically it was some SQL injection. We can look more into the actual thing of it. But basically, this project had a CVE. Somebody at GitHub was like, can we use this as an example? And I said, absolutely you can. I love it when everybody sees my mistakes.
Amazing. I think this is the first old code of a CVE that we've looked at.
It was like relatively still being made. Like I was kind of still working on it at the time.
Yeah, right.
Of the CVE, like this is probably like 2-3 years.
There's a README update 6 months ago. Or was that just when you said it was archived?
Oh yeah, that was when I added this.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So I think that's most of the story. We can try to. So I wasn't able to get it running. Part of that was because I could not install the dependencies. And part of that was because I couldn't get MongoDB to run locally, but that's a separate problem. Most of it is that I couldn't get the, it's beautiful. Look at it. Look at all these errors. I love it.
It's looks like every Node.js app I've ever tried to run.
Exactly.
So where do we start?
So I think we can start here in the README. So
cool.
I go into a bit of why, which is basically I want Craft CMS, but in Node, which is true.
Okay, cool.
The getting started. So I tried to make a CMS that would basically, you would run it like a server, where you, I never ended up making a CLI for it, but this would be sort of the entire functionality of your CMS based site. Like this is the only JavaScript you would have to write hypothetically.
Cool.
So you would instantiate a new Flint object and then start the server. I really like this part. Flint CMS employs new Node.js standards and functionality. So greater than 8.0.0 is the supported version. It's funny because we're on Node 14 now, I think.
Nice. The latest Node.js features and functionality.
Yeah, the latest. This was actually when Node added async await.
Cool.
So for those
fairly big and chunky feature. Yeah, sorry.
Oh my god. Like that kind of stuff. Before async await existed in Node, writing any kind of asynchronous code was like a humongous pain and took a lot of effort and was ugly and everyone hated it. I'm not overreacting.
Yeah. We had there's an earlier episode that should still be on our Twitch page. It might have timed out by now. I'll get up on YouTube soon, which is with Flucky, where we looked at an old Firefox OS app, and Firefox OS was pre-async await, and he had like a 200 megabyte promise implementation library in his app just to get like to try and deal with the problems. The bad old days.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So I actually remember not wanting to start this project until Node 8 was available. Yeah, because I didn't want to write that kind of code.
I was like that with Rust. I had a Rust project where I was like, I'm just going to wait for the async stuff to be ready. I'm not even interested in trying this before.
Right. And like, oh God, to have to rewrite all of that code anyway would be so difficult. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so you would write this basic file. You would run it by just calling like node, point to this file. You would have to have MongoDB somewhere. You would have to have a .env file or like some other way of injecting your environment variables.
Right.
And I think that's pretty much it. What's that?
That's pretty straightforward. That's nice. I'm guessing this is Express, like Flint was built on Express under the hood, or?
That's correct. Oh, yes. The other thing I was going to mention, this is probably the project that I have learned the most from.
Good. Nice.
I was not good at Node or JavaScript when I started this. By the end of it, oh, believe me. By the end of it, I was significantly better. When I was doing this, I had no idea how to test anything. Like I had not written any unit tests in my life. And that was, so as we were building Probot, I was like, look at these test things. These seem really useful. I should try adding these here. So I did. And I think that's part of the reason that I think this project ends up being really, really poorly done. Because I feel like once you know how to write tests, you write your code in a slightly different way.
Interesting.
Just for the sake of, testing it more intelligently.
Yeah. Right. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So where would you, if you were looking back on this today and thinking like, hey, I would do this differently, where would you start?
Okay. So the way that Flint CMS works, as I remember, it is a GraphQL server on top of a React node or a React app.
Yeah. So I mean, like for 3 years ago, that's still pretty contemporary stack.
I think React is like 9 or 10 years old, which is bananas.
Know, but it still feels like yesterday when everyone started using it, doesn't it?
Yeah. But I had used GraphQL specifically because I didn't want to have to deal with like a million REST endpoints, which I may have ended up having to do anyway.
Right. For folks who aren't familiar with GraphQL, which if you're a regular viewer of the show, you must be by now. But for those who aren't, do you want to briefly run us through what that statement you just said means? Like you wanted to use GraphQL, to deal with a million REST endpoints? Yes.
So I'm oversimplifying this, I'm sure, and somebody's going to yell at me for soap. But there are basically two ways to talk to a server, REST and GraphQL. If I make a REST server, I'm going to end up making a bunch of requests to different endpoints of that REST server. So something like, api.github.com/user/issues, right?
Right.
They're all different endpoints. However, a GraphQL API is one endpoint where you predefine what you want to get back from the server by passing a query string. So you would make a post request to api.github.com/GraphQL. And in that post request, you would include a giant string that's like, I want back 10 users and I want back the repository called GitHub/docs. That's a plug for open source docs repo.
Very well done. Very nice slide.
Thank you. I'm a professional. But yeah, so it's basically having multiple endpoints would be REST. Having one endpoint is GraphQL. With GraphQL, you sort of deal with this concept of resolvers, where the different sort of parts of your tree in GraphQL, they each have resolvers that say how that data is actually fetched So for example, you might have a user type in your GraphQL schema. And somewhere in your server, there's a resolver method that's like, when somebody is requesting a user with these given parameters, here is how you go and find that user. So we can try to find this. I just to set the baseline, I have not looked at this code base in 3 years. So
that is exactly how this is kind of like the first layer of the test. It's like, how navigable is the code base to start?
I think it's, I mean, I guess we're about to find out.
This is like a pretty standard MVC model view controller setup we're seeing here, which is something we've explored a lot on the show because we've had a lot of Rails on the show.
This is probably a lot more work than Rails. Okay, so the place to start, we're sort of setting up our little GraphQL sub router. I was very into using Express sub apps. So you would like create an entire Express app and then say to this sort of one primary Express app, use that other Express app.
Interesting. Wonderful. That's kind of like we had, was it Laravel? Someone was showing us Laravel and was showing us, so basically like Laravel works by having sub apps. So it's very Laravel-esque pattern. That's interesting.
Yeah, I know Laravel.
I've only encountered it on this show. I've learned a lot.
Nice.
Okay, interesting. So can you show us what that sub app looks like? So I guess it's here, right? So you've just got that module export, and then you're exporting.
I definitely can if I can find it.
Okay, cool.
This looks right. Yeah. Okay. Here. So, this is basically where I go and start the server, or at least create sort of the main underlying Express app.
Right.
I put some middleware, cookie parsing, session storage, authentication with Passport.
Right.
I'm not actually sure why I needed this, but it's there.
For testing and up, your comment tells us it's for testing and uptime monitoring, Jason.
Write code comments. Yeah, so here we go and require in some of the sort of sub apps. And these are full-on Express apps that have their own middleware stack. So
interesting.
Click into this one, for example. This is the admin dashboard, which is a whole little React app. You can see that we're, man, there's a lot I would change here.
Remember it. We'll be back to that.
So
why would you do this as opposed to just having like /admin being a route?
I think the main reason is for isolation. So I know that if I make this a separate Express app, none of the middleware that's included in the other like sub apps, none of that is going to be applied here. And that just sort of like helps to isolate the different logic that goes on. That too, but like Express middleware, they work in layers, right? You add a middleware and then it applies to every route that comes after. That can be really helpful and also really annoying if you don't want it to apply to particular routes.
Right.
I think that's why I did that.
Interesting. That makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know why I did this. This looks terrible. I don't know why I would ever do that. My God.
Walk us through what's happening there.
So this is a way to say anytime you get any request, this is still under /admin because when we require in this,
you set the
you set the sort of like base path. Yeah. So anytime you make any get request, right? That's what the asterisk does. Go and read the index.html file from somewhere in here.
Looks like the admin app is reading it from.
Oh, you know what? This I think this ends up being built to an admin folder.
I see. Got you. Okay.
It would probably be this guy right here. This template.html.
Yeah, that says Flint CMS dashboard. That makes sense.
Yeah. So this ends up reading the file from there. Now, I don't know why I would have done this instead of like res.read file or send file. send file, which, sends the file and does some like express internal caching, which is very helpful. Yeah.
Point number one. So today, would you still do this kind of sub apps pattern, or do you have a better way of controlling middleware today?
I would absolutely use sub something. So the other option for that kind of isolation is sub routers. So you can do router equals express.router. And this basically gives you an isolated router where you can apply middleware to just this router and not anything that follows, but all of the middleware that comes before it is still applied. I think that's a good thing. And I think that with a little bit of sort of forethought, you can organize your app that sort of makes that work in your favor, instead of what I was describing earlier, which is middleware that does stuff that nobody knows about.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. But I do this pattern a lot. It helps you to isolate your code, make it a lot more readable, and make it a lot more organized.
So I was putting a funny face because you've got a comment there that says Istanbul ignore if.
Yeah, I wanted 100% code coverage, but this little if block, building the admin dashboard is kind of slow.
Right.
So I wanted to ignore it sometimes, but with this code comment tells the code coverage generator not to consider this if branch.
Right. So the code coverage generator was called Istanbul.
Yes.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yes. That's a helpful bit of information.
Yeah. That was where I was confused. I was like, is this a weird pattern called the Istanbul if or what something like?
Dude, that'd be awesome.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So I think we were originally trying to find.
Yeah. Sorry, we were looking at the GraphQL. You wanted to show how the GraphQL worked.
So another important bit about GraphQL. So it has two different kinds of operations: queries and mutations. It's basically read and write. Queries being read, mutations being write. So if you're changing something, you're mutating something.
Right.
So let's just take a looky-loo here into users. So I'm in the queries users. I want to find the single user. So we have this little resolve function method thing. Ignore this for a second. This looks very simple. We're getting the mongoose, which is an ORM for MongoDB. An ORM is like a database SDK. I'm just using more acronyms now. I'm going to stop.
We have an acronym watch here, but it's okay. We've done ORM before. Mongoose is like pretty much the dominant MongoDB ORM, right? There's not really a used alternative. So. Yeah.
I haven't used Mongo since working on this, so I can't actually say the sort of current state of things.
Sure.
I see a comment that says Mongoose is great. I agree. Mongoose is awesome.
I had a good time with Mongoose.
Yeah.
I think I last used it when I was following Wesboz's courses.
Yeah. Wesboz's courses are great. He's another Canadian, by the way. That's
really? Another Canadian, though. Of there's only two of them.
Yep. Yeah, we're best friends because we're the only Canadians.
Yeah. Our designer, the race.dev designer, Eileen, who made all of the wonderful assets which you see before you.
They're very nice. I must say, my compliments to the designer. Okay, so this anytime that you write a GraphQL query that's like, just pretend that this is a real thing for a second.
Okay.
You would say user, and you would give it. Actually, no, you would just do user because this returns the currently authenticated user by the context here.
Sure.
I think, or maybe no, I'm wrong. You do ID of like 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's a string. Yeah, because it's Mongo, so it's a string. Cool. And you would return like the login, for example.
Right.
And this get projection would look at the abstract syntax tree of this GraphQL query that I found. I found this function on Stack Overflow. and it would try to figure out which fields of this user sort of model you're actually trying to get, so that it would only select those from the sort of like resulting MongoDB database call, just for like, super duper major performance optimization that was not at all necessary, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Make
very, very reasonable premature optimizations.
Yeah, premature optimization. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, definitely that. So it would find the user object that way.
Cool.
Now that we're on the topic of MongoDB, I probably wouldn't use MongoDB if I were starting this from scratch. I think the only reason is there are a lot of different kinds of there's a lot of different kinds of data here, all of these different quote unquote tables, collections. I don't know what the word is in MongoDB.
I think it's just documents.
I think it's collections for like.
Oh, like the table analog. Yeah. It's collections hold documents, right?
Right.
That's right.
And especially, like, maybe it's just because I don't know how to use MongoDB very well, but especially while I was building this, I kept having to change things, and I kept having to like reach into MongoDB and like, manipulate some data myself. So I think I would probably reach for Postgres instead.
Makes sense.
For the record, part of why I wanted to use MongoDB was that I found relational databases to be really complicated at the time.
Yeah.
And frankly, I still do.
Right.
So I don't know. Pros and cons, pluses and minuses.
Yeah. I definitely have had some experience with MongoDB. I used MongoDB at a hackathon, the only hackathon I've ever won anything at. In part because at the time I was like, relational databases, but also because like the geocaching feature, the geofencing feature rather, was really useful. Which is where like MongoDB understands coordinate systems, and so you can query by ranges of coordinate systems. And we were doing like an app that was heavy on location stuff. But much as I sympathize with you saying like, I don't know if I knew how to use MongoDB properly, because like our query for a particular, when we were generating a route on the app, like a walking route, took too long for us to demo on stage, mostly because I used MongoDB like a brick and just had no idea what I was doing, because I was just trying to use it as a stopgap to not learning relational stuff properly.
I feel like databases, like I think you can write your own like custom, querying functions in like Postgres or Mongo to like, help you do that stuff really performantly. But then you have to actually know how those databases work. And like, I'm good at a lot of things. That's not one of them.
That's what ORMs are for.
Yeah, exactly. You get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it looks like databases, collections, documents. Thank you, NH Kerrigan.
NH Kerrigan is an MVP. Mongo has a UI somewhere for constructing those queries. That's good to know.
Nice. I kind of wish I could use Mongo again. I really like that everything is just a big old JSON object. That makes things easier to think about.
The big old bucket of JSON. Well, I mean, nothing's stopping you. Reboot Flint CMS. There you go.
Oh my god. Yeah. I think if I were to do this, so I remember spending just an obscene amount of time writing these GraphQL queries and mutations for basic CRUD stuff, right? Create, read, update, delete. There are tools out there that will do that for you, that will basically write all of those GraphQL resolvers for you. Type GraphQL is one of them. Prisma has its own sort of like little ecosystem of stuff. If I were to start over, 100% I would use Prisma. I would use the heck out of TypeScript. I mean HypeScript.
I'm physically in pain.
I'm an idiot.
Did you drop that in our chat the other day? Was that you?
Yeah. And do it again.
Oh, disgusting.
I'm writing a talk for Next.js Conf right now, October 27th. I had to really try not to like write the word TypeScript, cross out the T, and then put an H.
TypeScript.
Yeah. I think I just ended up writing HypeScript instead.
There must be like a whole ecosystem around TypeScript by now, right?
If not, I know what my next side project is.
Oh wait, is TypeScript actually like a thing?
I'm sure. I mean, it must be. I can't be the only one to have ever thought of this.
Yeah, but it looks like it's a thing that's not just a TypeScript parody. It looks like a genuine thing, which is I'm actually a little bit disappointed in.
Oh, it's very disappointing. Yeah. Okay, so I would use TypeScript. I would use Prisma. Part of the benefit of Prisma, I'm still not an expert. I've looked through it a whole bunch, but part of the benefit is that you get sort of like a typed look at your database schema, and that helps to generate GraphQL CRUD stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It could also help to generate REST CRUD stuff. But I think there are lots of benefits to using GraphQL, and as long as you're not writing all of it yourself, you might as well do it. If you are writing all of it yourself, that's also fine. It's just, a lot of work.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just noticed that NH Carrigan is apparently our hype train conductor, which is a ridiculous title that I didn't know Twitch gave a badge for.
I love it.
Okay, cool. So GraphQL, we've explored that and where you would do things a little bit differently in terms of, like generating these things and using TypeScript to help do that. I posted links to the projects you mentioned, so Type, GraphQL, and Prisma, and also Next.js Conf if people wanted to stalk your talk. What's next on our adventure?
I really wish that I could show the admin dashboard, but
it's generated and you can't build the code.
Yeah, it's actually, you know what? We can just take a quick look because it's gonna be it was Redux. Nice. I haven't looked at Redux code in forever.
Okay, so I've seen Redux everywhere, obviously, and I've never once looked at it or looked at any Redux code. Take me on a journey, Jason.
You're in for a treat, Joe. Oh God. Okay, so I will do my best to remember how Redux works right now because I have not looked at it in 3 years. Basically, it is a way to have a centralized store of information for your React app. You can listen to changes from all of your React components and have this centralized store. And that way, it's sort of like sharing state around components in your whole app.
Isn't avoiding shared state the whole thing? Did people were like, hey, we went through this effort to avoid shared state, and then we decided actually we wanted shared state, is what I'm hearing here.
Pretty much. I think at the end of it, you sort of want to balance. There's some things that you really only need in local state. So for example, like whether a button is like hovered or something, I don't know what you use state for that. But that's the kind of thing that you would want in local state. But for global state, you might want something like who the user is, right? Whether or not they're logged in. Something that a whole lot of different components around your whole component tree can benefit from. Right. That way, if you're saying like, showing the person's avatar somewhere else on the screen, you have that information readily available instead of having to pass it down all the way through your tree. Right.
Got you.
This is also, I think Redux has changed quite a lot since I last looked at it. But React Context, which is a built-in API, that had a fundamental change, I don't know, maybe like 2 years ago. I'm spitballing, it's probably like a year ago. Time is meaningless. And at that time, it became much more of a like global state helper thing. So I haven't used Redux because of that. But I think it's changed so much nowadays that I kind of want to give it another look.
Right. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So the way that it works is you'll have this reducer function, and it takes a giant switch where it oh God, this API is weird. Where it checks the action that you've passed, and returns a new state. So you would always return a full object that represents your new state. It's important that we're sort of like spreading in the old state so that it's getting all of whatever previously existed plus our changes. I think so.
That has like a slightly functional reactive flavor to it.
Yeah, a little bit. Trying to find where we would call that. Probably like, I'll just toast it. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so it works by having this dispatch function where you would dispatch an action, and then that would be picked up by reducers. And the reducers would figure out exactly what state to change.
Sure.
So somewhere in here, there's probably me calling the dispatch function. Yeah. So this is for these little toast components, which are like, little like pop-up notification.
Cool. So it's the same as like toast in Android land, where it means like
exactly.
Okay. Great.
And like somewhere in here, we figure out when the transition of the thing is ending because it has finished animating, and so now we get rid of that toast, which is stored globally.
Cool.
In state.
Nice. Awesome.
Now you're an expert in Redux, Joe.
Perfect. So reducers, I'm aware of that word mostly from closure memes, if no one's aware of this. Was it transduce? No, actually it might be transducers. Anyway, there's a closure meme about a similar word. Talk to me about reducers? I'm
not sure that I can.
Okay, cool. No worries.
I think the where'd it go? Oh god.
Nope. I have found a thing about reducers, which I will read.
The point of it is that you give it a the current state of your store, or you don't give it, but React gets the current state of your global store. Or it might be nested state. I don't remember. You give it the kind of action that you just did and whatever sort of like metadata that comes with it.
Right.
So like this is a good example. Actually, let's do this one. So we just created a new entry, which is sort of like a post in this CMS work. We've done the backend work. Now we want to do the front end work to sort of update. By the way, this is a single page app, so no hard refreshes. So anytime we want to change something on the page, we have to update the sort of client side state of it, right? So we create a new entry, but the UI isn't aware of that entry yet. So we have to ignore this for a second.
Okay.
So we have just hit the action type of new entry. We then append this entire entry to the entries array that is stored in the global state. Now, Jason, why are all of the entries stored in the global state all at once? Because people make mistakes. Okay.
Amazing. Okay, cool. This also might be a stupid question. So in that big return blob, everything is being spread, right?
Yeah.
Why?
So Redux is immutable in that you have this state. Anytime that you want to change that state, you're not changing the original object. You're creating a new object and returning that object.
Cool.
So to do that, we want to make sure that any state that we're not modifying is also brought along in this new object. So for example, we might, outside of this entries block, we probably in state have something like state.user, and we'll say, login JSON Petco, right? So, something like that. That is state outside of the thing that we're actually trying to mess with. We want to make sure that gets brought along. And the same is true for state.entries, right? We might have like state.entries and then a bunch of entries are just represented as objects. If we're adding onto it, then we also want to make sure that we're including the entries that existed before we try to mess with the state.
Right.
Is this Java? No, but it looks.
Yeah, sorry. And also, Krovan, it's not pre-recorded. Hello, I'm speaking to you from the past when we recorded this talk. And no, it's not Java, as Jason said. This is JavaScript.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, that makes sense. I understand why we're using spread here.
Yeah. I think this just tries to check if the entry that we've just created is already in state, which I cannot remember why this would have been necessary, but it's probably a bug.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So that's Redux. And I feel like I've learned something I'm going to forget in 4 minutes.
It's also worth mentioning that I think Redux has significantly changed since this. Like the sort of main gripe with Redux at the time was the amount of boilerplate that you would have to write. So like this big switch statement, and then that would be paired with these actions that would actually like do the thing. So we have this new entry action, takes a bunch of options. And then makes a GraphQL query, and then dispatches that reducer, I think is the right phrasing. All of this, like aside from the sort of post request, a lot of that boilerplate, I think has been sort of abstracted and removed. So I'm sure that modern Redux is very different. So in other words, you learn something useless.
Yeah. Which is great, which is part of what, when we do this old code review thing, particularly with JavaScript land, a lot of what we end up saying is like, hey, this way of doing things is no longer current because JavaScript changes every 6 months. And that's good and fine and okay. And also interesting in its own way. And yeah, as like a prime example of that, like you couldn't build this because you couldn't get all the dependencies. Whereas like we had someone doing C on the show last week and it was like 8-year-old C and it just worked because, you know, that's the trade-offs you choose with being on the cutting edge and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I can get it to work on Node 8.
Oh, I mean, that might make sense. Yeah, NH Carrigan, you're a VIP now. The bot shouldn't ban you anymore. So we had some questions from Krovan that I missed, which I'm assuming is why they asked, is this pre-recorded? So they said at some point, why CJS instead of MJS? And I'm not entirely sure what that's referring to. I'm assuming that's a dependency somewhere.
CJS would be CommonJS. MJS would be, I forget what M stands for, but it's basically different ways of sort of modularizing the code base and importing other parts of it.
Got you.
CJS definitely because MJS just straight up didn't exist at the time. This code base is 3 years old.
Yeah. Krovan, you came in late. So for context, we're reviewing old code that Jason wrote 3 years ago and talking about what he would do differently today.
Yeah, spoiler, a lot.
Yeah.
But I can't say that I've really tried to get the hang of MJS yet. I think that there's a lot of parts of Node and a lot of tooling that needs to sort of mature before just using MJS becomes mainstream enough.
Right.
And I'm not in a rush. Like, I think it's phenomenal tooling that will help a lot. I just don't think I don't personally need to rush to use it. Yeah,
that makes sense. And then another one of their questions, well, it wasn't really a question, less of a question, more of a comment. They think MobX works better than Redux. Have you heard of MobX?
I've heard of MobX. I have not touched MobX. So you might have missed this, but I mentioned that I used, okay. So I nowadays use React context more often than anything else, just for global state. Cool. But also I don't do a whole lot of front end React programming myself these days. The one time that I did, I used React context, and it was a performance nightmare. It's for a part of Learning Lab that's very, very dynamic. It's sort of like a kind of like a YAML schema builder thing.
I'm very intimately familiar with that.
The course builder UI thing.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to remember the name of it, but there was a global state management project that came out of the Facebook open source team, I think, fairly recently that was like entirely geared towards sort of like atomic state and managing to update very specific components without their entire sort of
recoil.
It is recoil. It's exactly that. I have not tried it. I have looked at it and thought, this would solve all of my problems. But I think that's a very specific use case around like highly dynamic things that modify particular components in a very particular way.
Right.
So if anyone's interested, you should check that out.
Yeah, I just posted the link in chat.
Right. Thank you.
How did that building go? Did we make any? Did it not work?
Oh, that's a good question. So I'm now using Node 8, and now we're just gonna have to try to see if it installs the dependencies again. It's gonna take.
Welcome to the dependency show. This is like when I used to stream games, and there was like a good section of my stream where we just watched me install games for 20 minutes.
That sounds really fun. Have you ever played Call of Duty Warzone?
No, because it's a 250 gigabyte download.
That's exactly right.
And I want nothing to do with that.
Yeah, and then you get an update like 3 days later for 50 gigs. It's wonderful. It's
like,
super
absolutely
fun.
Ridiculous. Yeah. And on the other hand, you've got Among Us, which like I finally gave in and played Among Us the other day, and it took like literally a second to download.
Yeah.
Like, thank you, game developers, for addressing my needs.
We have to play Among Us together, Joe.
We always say this about so many games, but time zones.
That's true. Yeah. I've been playing a lot with Tierney.
Nice.
Who,
awesome.
You know,
yeah. And I saw Tierney setting up a server and doing some weird server hacks, which I didn't understand because I hadn't played Among Us at the time.
Yeah. Good times.
Welcome to the gaming interlude where we just all dependencies.
This really is going to take a couple minutes because there are a lot of dependencies.
Cool. Is there anything else in the app you want to show us while this goes on? Oh, we're going to have a look at package, Jason. Cool. Yeah. I imagine a lot of these dependencies. I mean, we've already spoke about some that you'd swap out nowadays, but I imagine a lot of these other ones would be going as well.
You know which dependency I wouldn't swap out?
Go on.
Nunjucks.
Okay, what is Nunjucks?
I will die for Nunjucks. So Nunjucks, I don't know if you're familiar with, I'm just going to name more things. Liquid, which is the template system for Jekyll.
I love my like once a year excuse to do some like really hacky Jekyll site. It's like literally the big part of my year that I live for. So yes, I'm intimately familiar with Nunchuck. Liquid rather.
Mm-hmm. So it's the same sort of syntax where it's like handlebars as curly braces to reference.
Right. Yeah. And all about like filters as like the programmatic element. Okay.
Yep. Exactly.
Cool.
Nunjucks is very much like Liquid, but in Node. The GitHub Docs team does happen to maintain a project that is literally a Node port of Liquid, but Nunjucks is like a Liquid alternative in Node, if that makes any sense. Phenomenal project. I love it to bits. I would use it in everything if I could.
I've literally just found your Liquid port as well, which I will be using. Oh, actually, this is a good. I completely forgot about this. So, speaking of Jekyll sites that I build in hacky ways, the latest one, which is the internal documentation for the Enzo project, builds in a way that I stole from Probot. So thank you very much. The whole like building in the like having the docs live in the code repo and then using a GitHub action to push it to the Pages branch in a Pages repo. Thank you very much for that.
That was you can thank Beekeepers for that because I had nothing to do.
Nice.
For the record, not that anybody cares. I think stuff like that is so unfortunate. Like you shouldn't have to go, jump through all those hoops. I think it is
what it is.
Yeah, but it's a limitation of GitHub. Like that kind of use case is something that GitHub.
Well, in particular to this hacky method and why I went that way was we wanted the one doc site to be static, but bring in docs from lots of different projects which all live in their own repos. So this was actually a really nice pattern because the way that Probot does it, which is what we stole, was the docs, the Jekyll site in the Pages repo is bringing in the other docs with Git submodules, and the action is just updating the submodule. It's just pulling the submodule. So like that, like I don't know, is there anything GitHub could do about that? Like if you wanted to have a GitHub Pages site that pulled in a particular repo from like sorry, a particular directory from a bunch of other repos. That's a very specific feature that I don't know if
It is very specific. Yeah. I may just be like internally ranting about other stuff.
No, that's fine. Yeah. But it's a really neat pattern that I enjoy a lot, because now it's like, oh, we've got a new project that has docs. Just add the submodule and add this GitHub action to your repo and it will work, which I love so much.
Okay, it looks like this didn't work. Next try. I'm going to install the latest version of Node.js, and this will definitely work.
Oof.
Oh, wait, this can work. Okay, well.
Yeah, sorry. So we got talking about nunchucks, and then I got distracted by Liquid. So nunchucks is like Liquid. Cool. Can you show us some nunchucks?
So the way that Flint CMS works is that you'll have your own templates, basically.
Right.
Like you'll write your own HTML, your own CSS, and then that is served in a sort of like routed, templated kind of way by the Flint CMS server plus the admin dashboard.
Right.
And so we have this entry.njk for nunjucks file. This is in the text fixtures. And you have access to this object in your nunjucks, which would represent the entry that you're looking at. This is very simple. There's
pizza.
Yeah, I always have test fixtures that have things like pizza in them, because if you can't laugh at your tests, what can you laugh at?
Perfect. So I'm seeing there it's also got like the site variables that like Jekyll Liquid has.
Yeah, and a really big part of Craft CMS, which remember this is heavily based on, was that you could do things like flint.entries. I'm making this part up, but you might do like flint.entries.find by title or something like that directly in your template. Or a more reasonable example is you might do flint.entries.find all or something. And you would like for loop it, right? For entry, if it's inner of, and for, and you do like entry.title. And there you go. Now you have a list of all of your entries on your whole site.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, nunjucks is great.
Yeah.
Like this is so clear. It's the best.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it does. I do like Liquid for how basically exactly those kind of things, but you do get into some real wild hacky territory really quickly. Hey, Manan. There's definitely like, so part of what I was doing with this site that I was just talking about was I didn't want the developers to ever have to worry about defining a table of contents. So I was trying to set the whole site up to work basically to work purely based on the directory structure of the underlying like GitHub repo, and making that navigation in pure Liquid without having to get into like building it with JavaScript was not pleasant. There is some dirty hacks in that where I'm like keeping track of like the depth of directories in in variables and traversing back up and down. It was terrible.
Yep. Yeah, you can do a lot in these like Liquid nunjucksy languages. Whether or not you should do those things is a very different question. I've fallen into that trap too.
So that build failed?
No, actually it worked. I'm able
to
run the server, except that now I don't.
You've got no database.
Yeah, I don't have a database.
But the admin panel should still build, right? Or should still work?
I think the so on startup the server tries to connect to Mongo, which of course doesn't work because I don't have Mongo running. And
where's my like LinkedIn Lincoln Park soundboard? We got so far, but in the end it didn't even matter.
I can try one more thing if I can stop sharing my screen for a second.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I'm creating a .env file with some credentials. Oh wait, do I already have it? Oh, I do already have it. That's not a good sign because it should work. Failed to connect the server. What? Do I have to do this? I'm currently trying to change environment variables and then starting the server and then seeing that it doesn't work at all.
Maybe we'll add this to our rotating segments, just like randomly choose a really old Node.js project from the internet and try and build it.
Oh, that actually sounds really fun. I don't want to do it.
Actually, that could actually be really good.
Yeah.
Trying to divine old dependency error messages.
Okay, I'm willing to bet that this will require some more concerted effort.
Okay, that's no worries.
Probably can't figure out how to do in a reasonable.
That's totally fine. That's all good. We can call it there. We've had a good run and explored a good deal of this app, and learned things about Redux and GraphQL.
Wait.
This is gonna be an addiction now. We won't be able to stop him.
Yeah.
We'll be starting the 10 p.m. stream in 5 hours, and Jason will still just be in the corner trying to get MongoDB working.
It's not working. Oh,
wait, I might just like take this clip and like GIF it and loop it and just feed it in as a camera in the corner of the stream for the rest of the month.
This is really gonna bug me because I'm so close. I'm now digging through. I think I can show this part. Yeah. Here.
Okay.
I'm digging through the database configuration stuff. So I have this database.js file. Oh, thank you. This database.js file that creates our like sort of informed Mongoose object, makes the database connection. And I think it's getting stuck on this stuff. I can't set up MongoDB locally for some homebrew bug. It's not Mongo's fault. So I'm trying to run it in production mode, and that's not working for some reason. So yeah.
I mean, where is that? Is that actually like calling out to like MongoDB like Atlas or something?
Yes, that is. Well, so that's what I'm trying to do now. And I have things in my .env file, which I won't show because it's a bunch of credentials. There's also an email server contained within this for things like account creation, verification, forgot your password stuff. Which
so you weren't just using SendGrid or something, you actually had that rolled in. Interesting.
Yeah, so the reason I wasn't using SendGrid is that I wanted this to be as like drop-in as possible. I think I had to end up using an SMTP server that I used NodeMailer, which is a Node abstraction library basically for writing emails. But like I didn't want to. It just kind of I was using Gmail, I think, as a default.
Right. Interesting.
But I think all of this is supposed to be sort of optional. Like the server should run without it.
Right.
I think just yelling at me to yell at me. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else you want to show us on this app before we wrap up?
There's some cool WebSocket stuff in here, but I don't think it's that interesting. I just think WebSockets are always interesting.
WebSockets.
Oh, it's Socket.io. If anyone's curious, repo's open source. GitHub.com/JPEtco/FlintCMS.
Pop that in a comment again. And if people want to reach out to you and ask any questions about anything we've shared today, where's the best place for them to go?
The Twitters. Twitter.com/that's the one. That's the one right there.
Jason Echo below. Awesome.
Yeah, you can you can DM me, you can send me dog pictures. That's always good.
Nice. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with us today and for telling us your story and for showing us your app and walking us through a lot of my impertinent questions.
Yeah. Thank you for giving me something to do for the rest of the day because I'm not going to sleep.
Try to fix this. Well, tweet us if you get it working.
Oh, I will.
We'll host an emergency show just to show it.
Excellent. Great. I'll send you screenshots because I don't have screenshots of it.
Okay, cool. Perfect. Alrighty. Well, I will do the awkward backstage shuffle and shuffle you back while I do the outro. Thank you again so much and farewell.
Bye.
All right, thank you again, Jason. That was awesome. So just a brief recap. We spoke about Jason's journey from design intern up to senior software engineer, and spoke about some of the cool projects he's worked along the way, such as like Probar and Learning Lab, and now the open source GitHub Docs site, which Gregor talked about the other day. And now you've met someone who's worked on it. Super cool. We reviewed Jason's old Flint CMS app, which he built as an alternative to a popular PHP CMS. And we got to look at some of his technology choices, some things he do differently today, explore some GraphQL and some Redux, and not get it working, which is fine. And that happens. And that's the nature of software on the internet. So for the rest of the day, this is our second show. We have one more show to go. If you want notifications when we go live, we're going live 3 times a day for the rest of October, so 9 days. If you want notifications when we go live, please drop us a follow. Click the love heart, then click the bell. Twitch will not give you notifications if you only click the love heart. You also have to click the bell. So whilst your love hearts are appreciated, if you want the notifications, please do click the bell. If you want to check that schedule yourself, you can find the schedule at twitch.tv/schedule. And to give you a little teaser of what is to come, this afternoon, we have Sarah Guffels. That's in about 5 hours and 40 minutes. Sarah is a principal program manager at Microsoft, has a really interesting career through all kinds of stuff. We're going to talk about her career and her work on our last stream of the day in about 4.5 hours. Tomorrow, first show of the day, he's not here, so I can talk about this without embarrassing him. First show of the day tomorrow is Matthew Cowley. Matt is the community manager of DigitalOcean, currently working on Hacktoberfest. He maintains the Hacktoberfest app, and so has been on the front line of a lot of the things that have been going on with Hacktoberfest. You may have been aware of the earlier spam problems. Matt was the one who drove that spam fixing and all that good stuff. So that's going to be a really interesting show tomorrow. We're going to be getting into all of that stuff with Matt. The Hacktoberfest app is open source, so hopefully Matt will take us through it tomorrow morning. Then we've got Daniel Furry from Strappy.js. So I know someone in the chat earlier mentioned Strappy. Strappy is a headless CMS, so it's a CMS designed to be used with your own front end, with your own client, and you just call to it via an API. It's relatively new. They're out of France. Daniel is a developer advocate with them, and he's going to be joining us in the midday show. And then tomorrow evening, we have Hugh Rawlingson, and we are going to be talking about Hugh's methodology around releases. He has a really cool blog post about automating software releases and this kind of thing. We're going to be talking about that, which is very exciting. And then brief speed walk for the rest of the week. Thursday, we've got Beth Pan from Microsoft. We've got Adrian Howard from Coria. We've got Jennifer Davis from Microsoft. That's going to be a very DevOpsy show. Friday, we have Josh Zilak, founder of Orbit, Stefan Young, Customer IO, and Corey Alexander as our last show for this week. So that is everything from us. I think with Corey, we're doing Sleep. I think we're doing Sleep with Corey. So that's everything from us for this show. I'll see you in 4.5 hours. If you can join us then, I know that's late for some of you. If you can't join us then, hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. Last thing before I leave, if you haven't heard of us before, you haven't yet signed up. If you're looking for coaching to take the next step in your career, whether that would be getting your first dev job or changing jobs or doing a career transfer, moving from mid-level to senior, whatever it is, our experienced coaches are here to help you. They will work with you to get you the experience you need to make that career transition, and you can sign up completely for free whilst you're in early access at raise.dev. So see you later. Thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day or the start of your day, whichever end of the day it is. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Farewell.